record this session. It was a little bit late, but there we go. So I'm going to play this, and please feel free to turn on your camera or turn it off, whatever is convenient for you.
The investment conference recently held in Windhoek tackled a variety of topics from transport to housing, tourism to ICT as well. I sat down with one of the key speakers, that is David Akinin, the managing director of Namibia Property Group, who took part in the investment conference. Let's take a look at this insert. Well, recently Namibia hosted the Invest in Namibia conference that tackled a variety of issues, ranging from energy to logistics and transport to housing. Our next guest is David Akinin, who is a speaker at the Invest in Namibia conference. David, welcome to the set.
No, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here today.
Okay, maybe you can just, obviously you're the MD of two property companies, Namibia Property Group as well as the Namibia Project Group. Can you just give the nation an overview of what these companies entail?
Yeah, by all means. Look, there's a big housing demand. Some people call it a crisis in the country. And I myself saw an opportunity to bring in funds to the country and create what we call a self-financed developer builder. So our intention is to kind of create a vertical integration of the construction process and investment process so that we can become profitable in actually making affordable housing.
But within that, let's kind of deal with, in terms of the deficit that you're talking about, the gap that exists that you're trying to respond to. Some call it a crisis you're referring to. But a lot of the times it seems like there's a confusion between, do we really have a land issue, or do we have a housing challenge, or is it an interlink between the two? So just from identifying the source of the challenge, what do you say is where the deep-rooted problem lies? Is it more of a land issue or a housing issue?
Look, I think it's an issue of what society wants to make it. Namibia is 26 years old as a current nation. Let's not forget our history before that, but let's forget that housing provision was even given before. There are countries, and I said this yesterday, there are countries that cannot determine their age, and they lack over 1 million homes. So yes, there is an issue of land provision, and when I say land provision, it's the idea of having land that is readily available to build on top of. But I want to take the discussion to something else. It's Namibians don't want houses. And this is something I said yesterday, and I borrow this from ideology from actually a Venezuelan professor at Harvard, Ricardo Hausmann, is Namibians want habitat. And habitat is an agglomeration of, it's in a complexity. It's more than just a home. And it includes the physical, the education, and the social.
But then what you're pointing to is, a greater understanding not of the outcome, but rather of the process. And so within the process, there's obviously various elements that will either create an enabling condition for that outcome to be reached or not. And so what are some of these enabling or disenabling factors when it comes to, the housing property market, the value, when you're talking about affordable housing that's been designed in innovative ways? Do banks finance that? Is there a legal framework? Do rent controls and, affect mortgage prices, service land? So given all of that context, how do you respond to that in an efficient and cost-effective manner?
Yeah, you touch on the biggest issues that keep people like me up at night, both at the hiring level. We have at some point had over 95 people working for us here in Namibia. And how do you keep those people engaged? How do you keep those people employed if you don't have new projects? Same thing with people who are looking for houses. Where do they find these houses? Look, I think what is missing is a table where we can all sit down on. Not a newspaper that we can read or a TV station where we can just complain about a certain issue, but a table where we can point at the actual issues we are facing. And I'll tell you why I want to create that. One is land provision. Local authorities, regional governments, national governments are 3 different types of government. They don't sit in the same room, and they're not always communicating about the different developers that are having different intentions in their towns. So in terms of land provision, there is a bit of a disconnect there. There's a little bit of red tape there, and there could be some progress to be done in order to help people like us who are trying to invest, who have the right intention. I mean, we are selling houses at around 300,000 starting, and that's a very good price for anyone who is working to be able to afford. So in terms of that, land provision, government, we need them on the table. Then we have the developers. And when I say developers, I'm talking about both construction and financing of that construction. A lot of these people are not connected. They're not having that discussion. Those two need to come to the table to find better ways to be accountable to their projects. A lot of people are good at building, but they're not good at keeping timelines. Both from NHE all the way to people who are having private projects. There's projects that are delayed by months because of project management skills that are missing on the ground.
Now, given this proposition that you're saying, there's almost what you're pushing for is this idea that, if we want quality housing or a quality housing scheme or accessible and affordable housing, we really have to share the responsibility is really what you're summing this up to be. But who are the key drivers in this process? Because, at certain points, too many cooks can spoil the broth.
Yes.
So who needs to be driving what part of the process?
Look, it's tough to throw more tasks at government. Government has a lot of work to do. Just look up the Harambe Prosperity Plan. That's just already too big. But one of the things that I think is important is to be able to point at the leaders of industry. You see, I would propose that from the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, or even from the Ministry of Finance, who's trying to drive the PPP discussion, somebody would come to the table and kind of host the first session, where people can come and have an informational meeting. And from there, you kind of find out who are the leaders, and you create subgroups. Just like there is a Namibian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, there can be a Namibian Chamber of Developers or financial institutions. And there can be one that kind of contributes to this housing agenda. This is the housing agenda, that's all it is. If you don't need 100,000 panelists to kind of get the ideas on the ground, but you need a centralized place where these ideas are coming to the table and they're being dealt with in a responsible manner, where formal discussions are being had between the parties. And sometimes half of the group will not be invited to these discussions because it's not relating to them. But if we have a forum where these things can be discussed, I can guarantee you we will not even have to get to the forum because the issues will be solved before they are brought up. Because they know now there is an accountability process. There is a forum where things are going to start being brought up.
Okay. Final message to the nation with regard to housing. Should people continue to be anxious? Should they have some hope when we're hearing people like you being part of the industry? What should be our response and anticipation in terms of expectations and in terms of the response to the housing crisis?
Look, I'm in a comfortable position, and I am more fortunate than a lot of the people who do need a home. And I am conscious that home is a right. A roof over our family is something that is very important, it's fundamental, and it's hard for us to sit here and discuss it when there are people actually suffering from strong rains in the north right now, trying to rebuild whatever they had. So I can't sit here and ask people not to be anxious and not to be upset and angry at the process or at the system. But I would recommend that everyone does their part. If you live in a town or in a village where you may not have the access to finance or you may not have the access to materials, contact the Shack Dwellers Federation. There is something out there for everyone in this society to start doing towards building your home today. If you have land and you are looking for a partner who brings capital and construction experience, reach out to me, for example, or reach out to other developers who you may have met. But everywhere around the process, start doing your part. It's very easy to complain because we are the ones suffering in the different things we complain about. But if you add value to the solution, if you bring forth something from you, then you have the right to complain. And that's what we should all strive for, to attain the right to complain.
David Akinin, thank you very much for your perspectives and for joining us
Thank you.
Well, Namibia.
David, thank you for watching yourself talk. I know it's really hard for me to do that if I was the one watching myself, but I know people joined this session because they really wanted to meet you in person. The goal was just to give some context of your experience. I know this was 3 years ago, 2019, when you had this interview, and we talked earlier this year. So a lot has changed. COVID has perhaps changed a lot about you, but please, the floor is yours. If you can just be gracious enough to just introduce yourself. We're going to talk about JABU technologies. I know you have a lot in-depth analysis of emerging markets. You have traveled across Africa. You're trilingual. I mean, more than trilingual, and there are many other things. But I would just love to hear about JABU technologies, what it's up to, and I think hopefully others can be as excited as me to hear about your entrepreneurial experience across the African continent, and finally you take on emerging markets and entrepreneurship. So please, the floor is yours. You can just start with who you are and, kind of how you got to where you are. And thanks for being here.
No, my pleasure. I think, watching myself, it's interesting, but also a lot of interesting context, right? Like what I was watching was myself full of energy, tackling a very large problem that I still care very much about, despite what I'm working on not being at the center of it. One of my brothers, Sam, runs our construction company today, and we've continued it today. Our company is called Ateno Developments. And it still focuses on trying to create infrastructure, whether that may be housing or whether it may be classrooms and for schools and even clinics. We built a clinic last year as a family. And it's difficult. The building is an amazing industry. Construction allows to obviously set the foundations for the infrastructure that will build communities and that will create spaces for communities to be able to live in better places and have all the things that they need, whether they're residential, education, healthcare, or any of the social kind of institutions that we have. But it is also a different type of industry from what you're used to in the tech world, because there's no scalability around projects. You build a project. Every time you build a project, from the beginning to the end, you have to give 100% of your energy and soul. Sourcing materials for one project doesn't scale to the other project. Prices have changed, towns have changed, logistics have changed. So I would say in many ways that construction is a lot more selfless than building other types of companies, because you are putting a lot of energy into some of these projects, but once they're finished and you hand them over, you got to start over again. All that energy has to come back, and all that same kind of effort of sourcing has to start from the beginning. That's key. And anyone who embarks in construction kind of gets that. It's a very unique industry, but it has something very different that other industry don't. And that's the tangible aspect of building something. And once you see something built, it stays there forever. It may not be scalable, but no one's moving it unless you decide to demolish it. And it has quite a nice thing that it retains value. And it retains value over time. And I think, buildings and property are one of the oldest type of wealth accrual mechanisms. You could own land and plant on it and reap benefits from it. But even if you're not reaping any daily or monthly benefits from agriculture or others, sorry, I'm yawning sometimes, a bit late for me. At the end of the day, you'd find that, property is one of those things that even when the markets crash, the value kind of remains, and it's quite physical. About a year and a half ago, we kicked off JABU Logistics. JABU is a technology company, as you mentioned. We are doing the last mile distribution to the informal sector. So we're actually very excited about what that means. We've raised money recently, which allows us to start hiring a bigger team and to focus on a lot of the issues that we find in Southern Africa, that mom and pop retailers, the small shops that sell in their communities are experiencing, not only from a sourcing, but from a pricing perspective. And we're working really hard with brands all over, from beverages like Coca-Cola and different breweries to flour manufacturers, pasta manufacturers, sugar manufacturers, or even distributors of brands right now in Namibia, to help them be able to not only distribute the last mile of their products, but to get customers to be able to order those products and to order them effectively and at the best prices possible. We have a vision for Southern Africa, so we believe our business can be cross-border. And we are very busy building up our tech team and also building up our strategy team all the way up to growth. So that's a little bit of the background on what we're up to these days. I think you invited me to this to kind of chime in a little bit on that, but happy to take any thoughts or questions you have and see how I can add a little bit of value into the conversation.
Sure, definitely. And I will definitely just open it soon for people to start asking questions. I think that's kind of where why this exists. Just a kind of a take on how you have, and maybe I can change the question. So, I mean, I know COVID kind of, affected the way we do business, and I'm guessing you work with retail, in the retail sector. How has that been, and how have you been able to raise money in this period to actually, continue to do what you're doing, like to kind of sell that vision and actually get people on board to really believe in that? And what do you see post 2021? I know we talked about this on the podcast a little bit, but I'd just love to hear your take as of May 20th. I think Namibia is May 21st. If you can share a little bit of that and how you have been able to make it work despite the challenging times. I think that would be encouraging for people to hear.
Yeah, I'd start with one of the things that we'd probably consider a cliche, which is, sorry, Jacob, which is that in times of crisis, there's always an opportunity. I think when we are looking at what's happened in Namibia, there's definitely been a slowdown of the economy. There's been a slowdown of the economy in a lot of places in the world. A lot of manufacturers have gone out of business. A lot of retailers have gone out of business. But that doesn't mean we stopped living. That doesn't mean we stopped having needs. And I think the world needs more people thinking about the future of humanity. And for us, we discovered very early on during COVID that because the taxi association had shut down, because transport had become a bigger issue, because there were less people in the street, e-commerce was going to drive a lot of the change for the future. But there wasn't that type of accessibility for less density markets like Namibia. There wasn't that type of accessibility for lower income economies. And we immediately thought, well, what does that mean? What does that mean for sourcing? What does that mean for the small retailer? And I think, that's the first thing. You need to identify opportunities as they come. It doesn't mean that this opportunity could have been there for us 5 years ago. But at the same time, it means that you need to bet on the horse. And I spent a lot of money from my personal wealth with my brother's wealth. We used a lot of the money from our construction business to go prove to the market that we thought there was an opportunity here, that there was a business. I woke up every day and went to sleep very late every day for almost a year, and invested a ton of our money into this opportunity, into this idea, because we believed that it was one worth pursuing. And we had pushback from many sectors. One, from our perspective of, is Namibia a big enough economy? Is this a big enough opportunity? We had pushback from also the thinking of, are you committed enough? But at the end of the day, no one can believe in something more than you if you're the one who's committed to make it work. And I think you can blame the economy, you can blame the world, you can blame the size of your country or your market when things don't work. But when things work, you can realize that all those things people could have easily blamed to say that it's not going to happen. It all comes down to whether you were putting in your time. And I think that's what it is. Look, I'm here at 1 a.m. talking to you because I appreciate you, because you put in the time, you create a great platform to make a place for people to come listen about ideas and about entrepreneurship. And if one person picks up an idea that helps them change their economy, their market, their lives for a better way, I think that job is done. And it's the same way we do business. Sometimes people say, how can you be building something in a tough economy? And you find the other people who say, good for you for building something in a tough economy. And I think it's about attitude. So especially during these times when we find that easy thing about COVID as a blame factor for not doing something, it is easier for investors to identify those who are trying harder, those who believe stronger in what they want to do, and who are able to push through the noise. And I think that's quite key.
That's well said, beautifully said, and I appreciate the comment, the kind words. I'm learning from people like you, so thanks for being here. So we're gonna open it up to people to ask questions. I see Duncan was probably trying to say something. We have some questions that were submitted. They were kind of kind of general questions, but we'll actually, do live, then go to, submit the questions and live. So, so please, if Duncan, you have a question, Madalisto, sorry if I didn't pronounce the name right. If you have a question, please. If not, we can have some questions submit. We can ask some questions that were submitted.
I will just ask a question without my video, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem, please.
Yeah, I'm Duncan. I'm joining in from Boston, but I'm originally from Kenya and motivated by what you're doing in the continent. My question would be, what level of support do you receive from like the local governments, and what's your interpretation of what would be the best strategy to work alongside the government, as a private sector player, to expand access to services and grow the industry in as much as you're putting private capital and all the work that needs to be done?
Yeah, that's a great question. One that took away a lot of my time when I first came to Namibia. I thought government was everything. I thought I had to do everything with them, through them, just because of the idea that, I don't know, I was investing in Africa, in a continent that was ripe for investment and that wanted to hear more. I would say government is an important player in everything you do, but it's not at the center of your business model. And I think that's key to JABU, but wasn't key necessarily to construction. Look, we're not regulated, right? Like, we're distributors. We don't need like fintech licenses. We're just trying to help the private market do things better. And I think that's what empowers us to know that we have a big road ahead without a lot of kind of intervention and difficulties. That being said, we spend a lot of time talking to government, understanding the pain points, understanding. And when I say government, I don't mean the president or the minister. You could be talking to government. It means to engage with the municipality. So I would maybe express government in three ways. You have municipal councils, regional councils. You have the federal government, which is president, ministers, and all those people. And then you have a civil servant population, which is a huge market, by the way. And I think anyone who's trying to build a business should think sometimes of government as a friend rather than as a regulator or a stakeholder. Now I'll start with the market. Government is a really important employer. It's the largest employer from an economic standpoint in many of the towns in Namibia. Definitely over 100 and something thousand civil servants, all of them making significant salaries that produce a great economy around wherever they live, work, and play. And if you're building a product that can cater to teachers, nurses, police officers, army officials, cleaners, and they have a sustainable salary every month, that is a legit business. It doesn't matter whether you own Kentucky Fried Chicken and you're trying to make fried chicken and sell it with French fries, or if you're producing cars and selling it to people who have a salary, or if you're making a bottled beverage and want to give it. That's all from a tangible perspective. But a lot of the economies we service are highly dependent on government employees. A lot of the tuck shops and bars and shebeens that we service are part of communities where teachers, nurses, police officers, their friends, their families, their kids, their husbands, their wives are living in. So it's really important to continue to support government, to pay your taxes, to be part of a productive member of the economy and kind of interact with that. And I think it's often overlooked when one thinks about the important role government plays. So I always think of government as my best friend because they pay a bunch of people who actually go out there and become part of the economy later and participate where we work. I would say from the federal and the municipal levels, it's always really important to understand where at the federal level, let's start at the higher level, where government is trying to go. If you're trying to become a productive member as a company or as an individual in an economy, it doesn't matter if you have a startup, if you're a builder, if you're an employee of an accounting firm, it's really good to know where your government wants the country to be a year from now and 5 years from now, especially so that you can benefit from the opportunities and understand the regulation. I mean, we have all these like prosperity plans and ideas that are going to be happening in the next 5 years, 10 years. about, where are the pillars of the growth of the economy. And I think it's really important to align your business to the federal government view of where they want the country to be going. So if they want to see more investment in a certain sector and your company plays in that sector, try to understand, what are the benefits they're creating, what are the avenues they're creating, what are the regulator bodies that they're creating, so that you can work alongside them. When we were in construction, they were talking about building X amount of houses in the country. I never did one paid government project in this country. We never were servicing government projects, but somehow I ended up on TV talking about housing. And that was because we were productive members. We were adding value to the government's agenda for housing creation. And they identified us as a key stakeholder, despite not having a business relationship with them. And I think that's because we positioned ourselves on the side of productivity rather than the side of complaint or doing things behind the scene. From a municipal, oh, by the way, once you start working with government, Duncan, and not with government, but aligning yourselves with government strategies and aligning your company with the vision for where the country should be, they start noticing it. They start noticing your people, they start noticing your team, because they want to have pride in the economy of things that are working alongside them, and they want to be able to show that results are happening. So sometimes people think that government is where we should be getting tenders and making money from, but I think sometimes they are just the avenue for us to be able to conduct our own business. I was named last week to serve on the board of the Namibia Barcode Association, the Barcode Center. And it's part of the Namibia Trade Forum, which sits under the Ministry of Trade. This is a huge honor. Like, now I'm sitting on the board of the Namibia Barcode Center. I'm not even a producer of products, but they think that because we're engaging so much with producing products and with companies that produce products, and helping distribute them, and we have a view for where we think the economy should be, and we have a Pan-African view. They said, well, let's pick this guy from this company, JABU, that seems to be doing something that matters and respecting government a lot, and let's have him be a stakeholder that can help us think through this stuff. And there's an exciting award, I would say, from a perspective of knowing that you're contributing back to an economy. It's not tangible, you don't get to see the money benefits of it, but you get to really help build some of the image of where things are going. And at the municipal level, for JABU, we're doing last mile distribution and logistics, trying to figure out how do we bring in more affordable products to the small shops that are selling in those economies to the people around them. And the city has asked us to join a panel with other stakeholders of this sector, whether they are in production and distribution, to try to help us figure out as a community of stakeholders, right? Whether we are NGOs or us, we are a tech distribution business, but also some of the producers. How do we create better nutrition in the informal sector? So, there are different ranges where government cares. At the city level, you find people caring about nutrition and about, the things that matter for the community. And at the federal level, you start finding people from different ministries, the trade and the finance ministry, that are planning where the country should be in the future. And I think the more you engage, the more you add value to their agenda, the more you create an ecosystem for yourself that adds value back to your team. And I'm one of these big proponents to build businesses that are not based on government tenders, that are not based on revenue that comes from government handing you projects. By the way, if you can get a government tender and build something, that is an amazing thing. I have nothing against that. I think it shows that you have a product that has been certified or ratified by a member of the government. And it shows that also you've got something that is worth building, and you have a huge commitment, because it's not one person paying you, it's the whole country paying you, hoping that you would do it well. There's a really bad reputation for people who get government projects, because usually money gets stolen or things get built less or get delivered undervalued. But if you can do that and you can do that well, God bless you. But there are so many opportunities to also continue building businesses outside of that realm of knowing that you have some guaranteed payment coming. And that's kind of where we try to focus our energy.
Well said, well said. Great answer, and congrats being appointed on the board.
Yeah, thanks.
the quote center. So I have a question online. I asked this is kind of straightforward question. What's the most important thing? What do you think is the most important when you start a business?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question because it could go in any direction. But let's see. I think the most important is to care about it. Not the business, but to care about the reason you're starting it, and to be very clear about it. You know, when I started this housing business, I didn't know much about construction. I wasn't an expert. I could say that the most important is to be the best, you know, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be the best before you start. I think to have a lot of conviction that what you're doing is something you're proud of and is something that's good, because the road in front of you will show you a lot of hurdles, will show you difficulties around preparation, about operations, about project planning, about fundraising. And if you're not enjoying that road, if you're not sure that what you're working on is something worth your time, it's not worth the pathway, and it'll be difficult to succeed, because the type of energy you need to get through the noise, as I like to call it, requires a lot of conviction, requires a lot of strength and energy to it. So it doesn't matter what industry we're talking about, and it doesn't matter how much money you did raise, might raise, or will raise. What matters is that you're spending your time, and the business could be successful. It could be, and success is measured in many ways, right? It doesn't mean the amount of people or the amount of money that you impact, but you know, whether you feel that every day you're improving, whether you feel that every day you're accomplishing the tasks and putting in the work. And this is a really important thing that you could hear in many different parts of society. Everyone will tell you, from doctors to engineers to entrepreneurs to artists, that the most expensive commodity you have is your time. Nobody has learned to value time, and the time you spend and the time you involve and the energy you give is yours. You choose how that gets spent. And yeah, man, I really think at the end of the day, it's up to you as an entrepreneur, when you're going into a business, to decide whether you're willing to continue it every day. And pretty much that would be it. I think the most important thing is to know that your time you're giving and the energy you're putting forth is really your best, and that you're not going to fall back. And I think if you have that every day when you go into a business, you will be building the best version of that business, you know?
Man, thanks so much for that answer. I really appreciate it. And I think that's very important for I think not just for entrepreneurship, but for anything in life, right? If you don't see the reason why, like, understand the reason why it's important. So thanks so much for sharing that from someone like you. I think that carries a lot of weight. So we have 2 questions that was submitted by one of our audience members here. I was just going to read her message because I think she can't speak right now. But she says, thanks for being here, David. I'm Sion Lee from South Korea. She works with me as the outreach partner in South Korea. And she had 2 questions. So the first question was, how did you start researching about Namibia in the beginning? And she followed up with, I understand finding what local people need is the most important. And you mentioned that you found Namibians one habitat. Which was what they really needed. So I guess the first question is, how did you start researching about Namibia in the beginning?
Yeah, look, I think when you know you want to do something when you find yourself reading a lot about it. I worked at Credit Suisse for 3.5 or so years between internships and full-time and whatnot. And I can tell you that I was reading African newspapers every day. I was reading Nigeria's newspapers in Enugu, in Anambra, in Lagos. I was reading international news on Widened, on Africa News and All Africa. I was trying to understand what was happening in Angola, what was happening in Equatorial Guinea. I traveled to some of these places. And eventually I came across Namibia, and it sparked my mind. So I would say before Namibia, I did a lot of research about the continent and trying to understand the news, the political structures, the parties that ran different countries, and kind of where they were coming from and what some of the general trends and opportunities were. When I first came to Namibia, I did a lot of newspaper reading. When I moved here, a lot of reading, trying to understand people's voice, trying to also understand beyond people's voice, what was the newspaper trying to sell me? What was the pitch of the newspaper? Newspapers will guide you, will make you believe things, will make you think about things. One of them will be pro-government, the other one will be against government. And Namibia has a lot of press freedom, so you'll get a good feeling from the right, you'll get a good feeling from the left about the big topics and the big issues. So I think that's something that you never stop doing. I read the newspaper a lot. It is super important. It gives you a really good understanding for what are the thoughts of the people who are trying to make the noise, and what are the thoughts of the people who can't, you know. Interestingly, another way to do that is also reading a lot of Facebook comments. So when you see an article being published by a local newspaper on their social media platform, Namibians are some of the funniest people I have ever met. If you read the comments, it's like, wow, Africa's really got a vibe to it. You know, you can laugh for hours reading comments. There could be an article published about anything, and unfortunately, Namibians will make a joke out of it. And it really gives you a good vibe for what people are thinking, what their education, what they come from, what are their values, really just from even reading their own jokes. So from an understanding of a society, I think that's number one. And I think, you know, somebody told me once, a mentor of mine, that it takes 20 meetings to find a good meeting so maybe you'll go to 20 meetings and one of them will be valuable to your cause. I think putting in a lot of time, trying to figure out, when I was buying land for housing, I used to pick up the phone to anyone who told me they were selling a piece of land, and I would drive 20 minutes, 2 hours, 4 hours, and get to a corner of the country and look at a piece of land, and I would be so disappointed, you know, like there's no services, no water, no electricity nearby. The guy actually doesn't own it. The guy never showed up. You know, there's so many things that would come up, and you have to put in the time. So I think from a research perspective, doing a lot of reading, putting in the time, and kind of getting to really feel the vibe for the people gives you a good understanding for where you stand, what the opportunities may be. Yeah. Sorry, that was question number one. Did you have a second question?
Yes, second question. So I agree, Africans can be very funny on the comments.
Yeah, it's amazing. I don't watch stand-up comedy anymore. It's all written down.
Exactly. So second question was, what was your strategy when you widened your business, like partnership with government?
So why did I not partner with the government? Is that what you're saying, Jacob?
No, the question was, what was your strategy when you widened your business, like partnership with government? What was your strategy?
Yeah, so look, I think a lot of us think of coming to Africa when you're an outsider, whether you're from Korea or America or Europe or Latin America, and thinking about how do we do business. And obviously government is a huge player. I haven't been successful in partnering with government from a business standpoint. I've been successful by using government as a stakeholder to support me and clap for me and kind of become an important stakeholder that allows me to operate. And I think that's a very different business model from what I find other people's to do. Most people try to find projects that are going to be funded by government or paid for by government, or try to work through government to get projects unlocked for them or to acquire a piece of land to do something. I think that's a great business model. It's a great business strategy if you have the connections and if you have the kind of influence that can get some of these things done. I'm going to be very forward. We are anti-corruption. We don't bribe. We don't pay somebody to do a deal on the side that gets us something. And I think that is something that comes up everywhere in the world. Something that comes up in Namibia, say it bluntly, at the local level, federal level, at the whatever level. It also comes up in the private sector. And I think when you depend on other structures to conduct business, it is more likely that these type of things happen because somebody becomes a gatekeeper and says, hey, if you really want it to happen, you can work with me. Our business model has been different. And I think that's what gains respect from your peers and from government, is that you don't need to go through gates to make our business work. You know, housing, for example, is a space where you can build thousands of houses if you go to a government and you say, give me the land or pay for them when I'm done. But from our perspective, you could go to the local government and say, hey, nobody's using that land in that corner. Let us build some housing. Let us pay you for that land, the value of the price of the property. Give us a year to build and finish and put people here. And let us show you how you can make more money as a local government by charging taxes to the people who are going to move into the homes we're going to build. And I think, you know, 19 out of 20 towns will say no, but one will say yes. So it takes us driving to 20 towns to convince one of them to work with us. So I think our type of partnership with government has been one where we don't expect to be paid. We don't expect to be handed something. We don't expect the revenue to come from their balance sheet, but we expect them to notice that we're willing to put in the work, that we're willing to put in the hours, and we're willing to put in the effort to make it as if it was only by them for them. And that's where we've been successful. So I would say, you know, try to always show that your business is sincere, it's legitimate. Stick to your values, never back down from them. I think people recognize that after a while. And you can partner with government, definitely. And I would challenge you to find creative ways to partner with government where they are on your side rather than on the paying side, because it would help you make stronger relationships with government, stronger partnerships with them. It might take longer. For us, sometimes there's a town where my brother's trying to build. I started the negotiations in 2016. Hasn't happened faster, might not happen, but we're almost there. And I think from his perspective, when he calls me and gives me an update and says, hey, this is what I'm up to, just wanted to like kind of get an idea from you where you see this going. You know, it's piece of land. We help them rezone it. We help them retitle it. We help them do all the work from a perspective of the technical stuff that had to be done for that piece of land to be ready. And now they're selling us the land so that we can go build houses on it for people who work at the municipality to move into, and that they can pay rates and taxes. But the beauty of that whole thing is that in the end, you know, we never had to pay them. They never had to pay us. We just worked side by side to make it work. It took a lot longer, but we sleep well at night, and we know that the project is going to add value to the towns where we're working.
And thank you so much, Dave. I can keep on listening to you all days. It's pretty amazing. Your answers are just so spot on. It's like well scripted.
No, man, it's a lot of it's you're not asking me to guess something. You're asking me about what I've been living for the last 8 years. So it's kind of like asking me if I've been paying attention along the way, and I have. So I think a lot of the comments I make are based on my experience. Some people might completely disagree, and obviously they've had different experiences if that's the case. But yeah, thank you for that. But I also mean it. These are things that we've been going through and living.
Awesome. We have a question. So we have a submitted question, and also there's a question from one of our members here. I'm just going to start because we are kind of rotating. The question submitted was, what is your most valuable mistake in the course of your entrepreneurial life?
What's the most valuable mistake?
Yes.
Wow, that's like an irony, right? Like valuable but mistake. Yeah, I think when I first came out, I worked with a partner who funded our business, and I would say that put all my eggs in one basket, and I knew very little about structuring, and I also trusted the other person a lot, and I think it cost me a lot of money because when we decided we were not going in the same ways, it's very difficult to get all your eggs out of a basket without cracking them. So let's just say I had to lay new eggs into different baskets, and I've learned a lot about structuring. That's one thing I think is really important, to spend some time on structuring. If anybody listening to this wants to know what that means, and you have a specific case and you want to know how to structure yourself and your business or your company or your land, we were buying land and vehicles and everything all under one company. I think you have to learn to set up different companies, different structures legally. No lawyer is smart enough to tell you how to build your business. You're the entrepreneur. So I think from a structuring perspective, that's not something that's ever taught. You only figure it out with life. Happy to pass on some of that knowledge if anybody ever needs that thought. And I would say another one is accounting. No one tells you how important accounting is. I can't say I'm ever doing it well. So I think that's a valuable mistake I make every day. I think hiring is probably my next challenge, hiring good accountants and making sure that we have people that are very organized and that are very structured and that are always building our books. You want to buy a car, you need an account, you need financial statements for the last 3 years audited, and you're like, what? Okay, I don't have that. I need to go figure out why we don't have that and why we haven't prepared that. But you've been entrepreneuring, right? You've been building a company. And I think building a company, sometimes you forget that there's a ton of admin work. And I think that's really important. It's really expensive also to kind of keep up with it. So yeah, if you're an entrepreneur starting out, mark my words, watch for accounting. And if I can clarify that, send me a note, send me an email, I'll say it again. I'll tell you personal experiences. We've discovered accountants who had our books, had all our receipts. We picked up the stuff, half of the stuff hadn't been processed. They didn't have the right oversight. We had to redo it. I mean, we will deal with this into the future. I'm not trying to say we're doing it well now, but definitely one of the mistakes that happens over and over, even with experience. So look out for that.
Oh man, accounting was one of the hardest classes I took in business school. So
it's got the worst part, Jacob, it's got nothing to do with the class, right? Like it's about being organized. It's about putting in 2 hours a day to like process receipts into some software that makes it. And then it's about like passing it on to an account. Like I'm saying accounting from the admin part, like you've got to put in the time. And yeah, the class is tough. I agree with you. I learned about credits and debits and about ledgers and general ledgers and knowing where your things go. But at the end of the day, balance sheets don't get built on their own. They get built on the time commitment that you have to put in daily to make sure that you have proper accounting reports at the end.
Exactly. Beautifully said. There's a question from one of our audience, as I mentioned earlier. She said, and it's kind of similar to what you've just talked, but what are the challenges that you have encountered in the process? And how have you or are you dealing with them?
Yeah, I think accounting is definitely one of the challenges. I would say 100% structuring, the legal structuring and stuff that I mentioned is another one. Hiring people is always a challenge, not because you don't find talented people, but because you want to build a team that represents your culture and people who can stay on, and retaining talent is key. I've put in a lot of energy to build up the skill set of somebody, and 6 months later they get a job that pays double because now they have double the skills. So, sometimes you don't have the money to counter offer. Sometimes you don't have the time to counter offer. So I think from a perspective of definitely building a talent pool that is committed to building your vision, that's a challenge that will never go away. It doesn't matter how big your company is, how small your company is. I think probably the bigger you grow, the harder it is to maintain it. But at the end of the day, that's why I would say that every day you show up to work, you show up with the same values and you show up with the same energy and time commitments, and you will have good days and bad days that will take away from that energy, but you try to bring it in the average amount of days so that the people that work around you don't get discouraged, so that the people who work around you remember that, hey, this guy has a vision or this woman has a vision and we should stick with him or her. And that's really important. I mean, people will come and go from your organization. But they will always remember how you do business, how you work, what you bring to the table, what your values are. And that's something they will never be able to question. And I think your reputation precedes you. And I think you are tested every day from a people relationship perspective, how you treat others. You are tested every day with how you greet the doorman, the cleaner, all the way up to the main guy or woman. And you are tested every day with the values you use and the ethics you follow in order to make business decisions, however small your business may be. And a lot of people say God is watching, but I think that's a way to tell that everyone is watching. And God is everyone in a way, so it doesn't really matter how religious you are or how you're not. It's the concept of saying that you're being watched. And I think the way you conduct yourself and the kind of energy you bring to everything you do is really important. And that's something we really have to work on every day. Nobody's perfect. We have families where we act in a different way because we're more comfortable. So I think you have to be very cognizant that everyone around you from your brothers to your spouses, to your colleagues, to your clients, are all deserving of the same you. And I think that challenge is to make sure that with the stress of the work you have, and the challenges you have for yourself as a business and in a personal, you still bring the same good you that you intend to bring to business, to make big decisions and small decisions with the same energy. And I think it sounds a little bit ambiguous, but the more you go through it, you kind of get to realize that that's probably what it's all about at the end of the day.
And that's inspiring. I don't even know how to follow that. We have one more question online, then we're gonna open it up for anybody to ask the final question because we're actually out of time. But the question online is, what are your future plans?
Yeah, I'm really excited about JABU. I'm committed 100% of my time to this. I've got some interest and stake into our construction business, so I will continue to support my brother in building the construction company from an advisory perspective and making sure I can give him my thoughts and help. But my main focus is to build JABU Logistics. We're a marketplace for the informal sector, for the informal retailers, trying to help them source their products, trying to help create avenues for growth of all of this stuff. And I'm excited to build a team. We're in the middle of hiring. We've hired a bunch of people. We're hiring others. I think we still have about 11 openings, and they're not eminent, all of them, but as our team grows, we see that over the next year, we'll probably be adding another 11 people, maybe a lot more on the ground, obviously. Every day, onboarding a new person, sharing the story about what we're trying to do is kind of the most exciting thing. And then I have to go back to work. So our vision is to really grow in Southern Africa and try to create an avenue of distribution and logistics with tech that gives people an opportunity to source products affordably and faster. That's kind of a big mission. And I think for the future, I'm just very focused on that. And I think it's a lot more than I can chew.
Amazing. Anybody has any last minute questions? I know we had a new member who always joins our sessions, Kevin. Not to call him out, but he kind of arrived a little bit later than we started the session. But I'm just gonna open it for a last question, or if not, we're gonna let David sleep. It's 2 a.m. in the morning in Namibia. So
a bit late. Sorry for my energy levels a bit lower. So yeah.
No, you did amazing, and I'm more than gracious. I don't know how I can be more than gracious to you for being here.
No, please, it's my pleasure. You do amazing work, Jacob, and you're putting the continent in high spirits and pride, and you're putting in the time, and you're putting in the effort, and you're putting in valuable time that you have to try to create an ecosystem, to try to bring knowledge to people, to try to spread the word. And the word in this case, I don't mean the gospel, but the word of entrepreneurship and the word of impact. And if I can add a little bit of value to your mission, that's amazing for me as well. So thank you so much for this.
Thank you as well. And this happens, my support, I've had support from everywhere. Kevin Richardson, who is here, has helped a lot. Duncan, who came in a little bit earlier, has kind of, they've been great friends that have really supported me. So I'll also give them credit to that. Sion in South Korea has also been more than incredible. So it's a teamwork, and I'm just being at the forefront. The team has done amazing work behind me. So that is something I want to give credit to them. So, but man, David, thank you so much. We're gonna let you go sleep. I'm sure a lot of people have been inspired. I'm actually going to go back home and reflect on some of the things you've said here. It's definitely going to affect the way I think about everything I do. So, and I'm sure everyone is empowered by your work. And if it's okay, we're going to send a follow-up email. And if it's okay for you, we can share your email address.
No problem, my pleasure. Yeah.
I'll reach out to you. Okay. So
cool.
Thank you, everyone. David, any last minute words before we just go? I want you to end the session.
Yeah. No, man. Like I said, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of work in the world. There's a lot of industries. There's a lot of people. Don't be discouraged by reading too much about what other people are doing. Focus on what you like, focus on what you want to do, and be proud of it every day. It will take you to where you want to go. Cool. Take care, everybody.
Amazing. Take care, brother. Take care. Thank you so much.